In the year 1665, London was one of the largest and busiest cities in Europe. Nearly 500,000 people lived within its crowded streets. The city was filled with narrow alleys, wooden houses built closely together, and open gutters that carried waste through the streets. Clean water and proper sanitation were rare, and rats were common in homes, markets, and warehouses. These conditions made London extremely vulnerable to disease. During this time, a deadly illness known as the bubonic plague returned once again to England, beginning what would become one of the most terrifying periods in the city's history, the Great Plague of London. The outbreak began quietly in poorer neighbourhoods near the docks, where trade ships arrived from across Europe. At first, only a few mysterious deaths were recorded, and many people did not realise the danger that was approaching. However, as the weeks passed, the number of deaths began to rise rapidly. The plague spread through fleas that lived on rats, which easily moved through homes and streets. Once a person was infected, the symptoms were severe and frightening. Victims often developed a high fever, headaches, extreme weakness, and painful, swollen lumps on their bodies called buboes, usually appearing in the neck, armpits, or groin. Many people died within only 2 or 3 days of becoming sick. Fear spread throughout the city as families watched neighbours and loved ones suddenly fall ill. As the plague worsened, the government and city officials tried to control the spread of the disease. One of the main measures was quarantine. If someone in a household became infected, the entire house was sealed for 40 days. Officials painted a red cross on the door and wrote the words, "Lord, have mercy upon us." A guard, known as a watchman, was placed outside the house to make sure no one left. Food was sometimes delivered to the door, but in many cases families were trapped inside with sick relatives, unable to escape the infection. Meanwhile, wealthy citizens, including merchants and government officials, fled London for the countryside, where the disease had not yet spread. Unfortunately, poor people had no such choice and were forced to remain in the city. By the summer of 1665, the situation had become devastating. Thousands of people were dying each week, and many streets were nearly empty as fear kept people indoors. At night, workers pushed carts through the streets, calling out, "Bring out your dead!" Families brought the bodies of loved ones to the carts, which then carried them away for burial. Because the number of deaths was so large, individual graves were no longer possible. Instead, large mass burial pits were dug, where hundreds of bodies were placed together. The constant ringing of church bells for funerals filled the air throughout the city. Eventually, there were so many deaths that the bells stopped ringing altogether. Doctors during this time had very little understanding of how diseases spread. Some physicians wore long coats and strange masks with long beaks filled with herbs and flowers, believing the scents would protect them from infection. Many people believed the plague was caused by bad air, punishment from God, or strange alignments of the planets. Without proper medical knowledge or treatment, most people could only hope and pray that the disease would pass them by. Toward the end of 1665, the number of deaths slowly began to decline. The arrival of colder weather reduced the number of fleas and slowed the spread of the disease. Gradually, the plague began to disappear from the city. By the following year, London started to recover from the tragedy that had killed nearly 100,000 people, about 1/4 of its population. Yet the suffering of the plague would soon be followed by another disaster. In 1666, the Great Fire of London swept through the city, destroying thousands of buildings. Although the fire caused enormous destruction, it also helped remove many of the overcrowded and unsanitary areas where rats had lived. The Great Plague of 1665 remains one of the darkest chapters in London's history. It showed how quickly disease could devastate a city and how limited medical knowledge was in the past. Yet it also changed the way cities thought about cleanliness, public health, and disease prevention. Today, the story of the Great Plague reminds us of the challenges people faced in earlier centuries and how much the world has changed since then.